There was a time in my life when I thought I was doing everything right. I was kind, dependable, always the first to show up when someone needed help. I thought if I gave enough, loved enough, tried hard enough, eventually I'd feel whole. That one day someone would look at me and say, "You're enough, you can rest now." But that moment never came, and the more I waited for it, the more hollow I began to feel. It's strange how you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely unseen. I was giving so much of myself away, hoping someone would notice how much I was hurting, but no one did. Not because they were cruel or careless, but because I'd made it my mission to hide it. I wore a smile like a shield, and gave love like it was a currency I had to spend to earn worth. There were nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, this dull ache in my chest that I couldn't name. It was like I was grieving something I never even had, and I'd ask myself, is this all there is? But I didn't let anyone see that side of me. I just kept moving, kept performing, kept proving that I was good. Good enough to be chosen, good enough to be kept. But something inside me began to unravel. I remember one afternoon I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and I just stared. The hum of the fridge, the way the light hit the counter, everything felt surreal. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had done something purely because I wanted to, not because it would please someone else or make me more likable or keep the peace. It was like I'd slowly abandoned myself, piece by piece, in the name of love. And that's when it hit me. I had been living as a reflection, always adjusting, always accommodating, always making sure others were comfortable even when I was drowning inside. I thought love meant sacrifice, and to be good meant to be selfless, even to the point of erasure. But the truth? The truth was, I was angry, not at them, not really. I was angry at myself for not knowing how to say no, for not believing I was worthy without proving it, for thinking that if I just endured long enough, someone would finally rescue me from the loneliness I didn't dare name. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big breakdown, no shouting or tears, just a quiet recognition. I didn't know who I was anymore, and maybe I never really did. I had spent so much time looking outside of myself for answers, for healing, for permission. But it was all a distraction. I was so afraid to be with myself that I filled the silence with noise, people, problems, expectations, roles, and in doing so I drifted further and further from the one voice that mattered most, my own. I don't think we talk enough about that moment, the one where you stop running and just listen. It's terrifying because suddenly there's no one else to blame. There's no more pretending that if this person loved me better, or if that job fulfilled me more, or if the world was just different, I'd finally be okay. All that's left is you. And that silence is deafening. But in that silence, something else began to rise. Not all at once, not clearly, just a flicker, like a candle in a dark room. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I deserved more than survival. That maybe I didn't need to earn love by disappearing. That maybe my needs, my voice, my desire, they mattered too. It didn't feel like empowerment. It felt like grief. I grieved for all the times I silenced myself, all the years I lived in performance, all the ways I molded myself to fit into spaces that were never built for me. I grieved for the girl who just wanted to be seen without having to prove her worth. But in that grief, I also felt something else, a quiet sort of honesty, a reckoning, the beginning of coming home. And that's where everything started to change. It's funny how we think change starts with a decision, like flipping a switch, but it doesn't. It starts in the cracks, in the quiet discomfort that builds over time. I began noticing little things, the way I hesitated before saying yes, the tightness in my chest when I agreed to plans I didn't want, the way I swallowed my opinions just to keep the peace. None of it was loud, it was subtle, insidious, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There was this one evening, not extraordinary in any way, just me, sitting on the floor in my room, folding laundry. I looked at a shirt I hadn't worn in years, but kept anyway because someone once said I looked nice in it. And I thought, how much of my life is made up of things I don't even like, but kept out of guilt or habit or fear of being too much? It broke something open in me. I started asking myself different questions. Not, will they still love me if I say no, but do I still love myself if I say yes? Not, how can I make this work for them, but is this working for me at all? These questions weren't always easy to answer. Sometimes I avoided them. Sometimes I hated what they revealed. But they pulled me closer to something real, something that felt like me. And then the resistance came, the internal kind. That voice in my head that whispered, you're being selfish, you're abandoning people, you're making everything about you. It echoed every message I'd absorbed growing up, that being good meant being accommodating, that love was earned through sacrifice, that silence was a virtue and boundaries were walls. But I also began to notice the cost. Every time I ignored myself, I felt it. Like losing oxygen, like shrinking in a room full of noise. I had spent so long being easy to love that I forgot how to love myself in the process. That's when I started paying attention to the chaos, not the external drama, the internal friction. The way my body tensed up in certain conversations, the way I flinched when someone made a demand I didn't want to meet, the way I would smile through discomfort and then crumble later, exhausted and resentful. It was all data, signals, and for the first time I stopped brushing them aside. I remember hearing a quote, I think it was Jung, something about how the soul speaks in symptoms, in moods, in discomfort, and if you ignore it, the voice gets louder, more disruptive. I think that's what was happening. My soul was screaming through the cracks I had tried to plaster over for years, and I was finally listening. The chaos wasn't punishment, it wasn't failure, it was invitation, a doorway. It said, things are not okay, but they don't have to stay this way. The scariest part was realizing that if I wanted something different, I had to be different. Not in the performative way, not better, not more likable, just truer. And that meant doing things I wasn't used to, saying no, asking for space, leaving conversations unfinished, letting people down. At first, I felt like I was betraying everyone. I remember one friend saying, "You've changed," and it wasn't a compliment. It felt like a loss. But deep down, I knew I wasn't changing into someone else. I was becoming myself. The funny thing is, once I allowed the chaos, really sat in it, without trying to fix or flee, it started to shift, not disappear, but soften. There was clarity in the discomfort. I could finally see the difference between pain that comes from abandoning yourself and pain that comes from choosing yourself. One keeps you stuck, the other sets you free. And maybe freedom doesn't feel like joy at first. Maybe it feels like disorientation, like walking barefoot after years in tight shoes. It's raw, it's uncertain, but it's also real. And real, I was starting to realize, is worth everything. I used to think that putting myself first meant hurting others, like there was some kind of moral trade-off. If I chose rest instead of showing up, if I said no instead of yes, if I walked away instead of staying silent, someone would suffer. And that someone's disappointment would be my fault. I carried that guilt like a second skin. It felt noble, even righteous, but it was also killing me. No one told me that self-abandonment doesn't make you more lovable. It just makes you more invisible. I thought I was being kind, thoughtful, understanding, but the truth was I was scared. Scared that if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being needed. And if I wasn't needed, then what was I even worth? I remember the first time I said no to something I would have automatically agreed to before. It wasn't dramatic, just a friend asking for a favor when I had nothing left to give. I typed, "I'm really sorry, I can't," and stared at the screen for what felt like an hour before hitting send. My heart pounded like I'd committed some kind of crime, and then nothing happened. The world didn't end. My friend didn't hate me. I didn't implode. Instead, I felt this small flicker of peace, like I had made space for myself, a space that had always been there but I never dared to claim. It wasn't easy after that. Some people pulled away. Others questioned me. One even called me selfish. That one hurt. It pierced right into that wound I carried, the one that told me I had to earn my place by being good. But then something unexpected happened. A new kind of person showed up in my life. Someone who said, "Good for you," when I set a boundary. Someone who didn't need me to shrink in order to love me. I started to realize that when you begin honoring yourself, it doesn't repel everyone, just the ones who benefited from your silence. And yet, even knowing this, I still struggled. The old guilt didn't vanish overnight. There were moments I'd catch myself backsliding, saying yes out of habit, over-explaining, apologizing for taking up space. But now there was awareness. I could feel it, and awareness changed everything. It meant I had a choice. I began redefining what love meant to me. Love wasn't sacrifice. Love was truth. It was showing up without needing to disappear. It was giving, yes, but not from emptiness, from overflow. I started paying attention to the small moments, the way I breathed easier after saying no, the peace that came from choosing rest, the quiet pride I felt when I honored my own limits. These weren't selfish acts. They were sacred. They were evidence that I was finally seeing myself as worthy, not because I did anything extraordinary, but simply because I am. And in that shift, something beautiful unfolded. I stopped needing to be chosen, because I had chosen myself. There's a power in that, a quiet, grounded strength, not loud or flashy, just solid, like I'm here, I matter, even when no one's looking. It's not a one-time realization, it's a practice. Every day, in every decision, big or small, you get to ask, am I honoring myself right now? And sometimes the answer is no, but that's okay too, because now you're awake. And that awareness means you're already on your way back home. I used to flinch at the word selfish. It felt like the ultimate accusation, the scarlet letter of relationships. Be anything, be quiet, be small, be pleasing, but never be selfish. That word haunted me for years, so I overcorrected. I gave more than I had. I agreed when I didn't want to. I poured myself out to prove I was good, loving, safe. And all the while, a quiet resentment was growing underneath it all, like roots in the dark. But then something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no screaming match, no grand betrayal, just me, sitting in traffic one day, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, realizing I was angry, not at anyone in particular, just angry, empty, done. And I had no one to blame, really, except myself, for never drawing a line, for never saying, this is too much, I need space, I need care too. That was the moment I started questioning everything. Why did I believe that loving others meant abandoning myself? Where did I learn that everyone else's comfort mattered more than my own? And the deeper I dug, the more I realized I wasn't living my life. I was living a performance, hoping it would earn me belonging. The most painful part was admitting how complicit I'd been in my own depletion. Not intentionally, I really believed I was doing the right thing. But all that giving had a cost, and the person paying for it was me. So I began the slow, uncomfortable work of reclaiming space. I didn't call it healing at the time. It felt more like fumbling in the dark, trying to remember who I was before I started molding myself into something easier to love. I looked at my relationships, really looked. Some people had been walking over my boundaries for years, not because they were malicious, but because I never actually set any. Others didn't even notice the subtle ways I'd been performing. They liked me, sure. But did they know me? Did I? And then there were the parts of myself I'd buried so deep I almost forgot they existed. The part that loved being alone. The part that had big, wild dreams that didn't make sense to anyone else. The part that didn't want to be agreeable all the time. Who had opinions, anger, needs. I missed those parts. I mourned them. Bringing them back into the light wasn't easy. At first, it felt like betrayal. I worried I'd become hard, cold, distant, but what actually happened was the opposite. I softened, because when you stop running from yourself, something tender begins to emerge. You don't need armor anymore. You don't need performance. You just get to be. That's what shadow work really is, I think. Not defeating some dark version of yourself, but embracing it. Looking at the pieces you thought were too much. Too messy, too inconvenient, and saying, you get to exist too. And you know what? Those parts have wisdom. They're not dangerous. They're honest. My anger taught me where my boundaries were. My sadness showed me what mattered most. Even my jealousy pointed to desires I hadn't yet allowed myself to claim. Every emotion I used to judge became a signal, a compass pointing me back to myself. I started writing more. Not for anyone else, just for me. I started saying no with less guilt and more grace. I started noticing how I felt in my body when I spoke the truth, even if it made others uncomfortable. There was a quiet power in that, a kind of aliveness I hadn't felt in years. I stopped asking, what do they need from me? And started asking, what do I need from me? And the answers were simple. Rest, honesty, permission, compassion. Things I'd given so freely to others, but never to myself. It didn't make me colder. It made me warmer, more grounded, more real, because I was no longer loving people from a place of emptiness or fear. I was loving them from wholeness, from truth. And there's nothing selfish about that. Something beautiful started happening when I finally stopped pretending that I didn't need anything. It was subtle at first, like when a room goes quiet and you can finally hear the hum of the world again. The silence that used to scare me began to feel like clarity. I wasn't running anymore. I was listening, and the more I listened, the more I noticed a shift in how life responded. I used to believe that putting myself first would push people away, that choosing rest or saying no or changing direction would lead to abandonment. But what I found was this strange and gentle opposite. The people who truly saw me, the ones who could meet me where I was, began to step forward, not in dramatic ways, just in quiet, soul-affirming moments. A text that arrived right when I was doubting myself. A conversation that left me feeling more full, not drained. A laugh shared that felt unforced, real. And just as some people drew closer, others began to drift. It wasn't ugly, no big fights, just distance. The kind that tells you, without needing to be said, that your vibration no longer matches theirs. And for once, I didn't chase. I didn't twist myself into shapes to keep them near. I let them go. And in that letting go, I felt peace. That's when I remembered what Jung called synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem random, but somehow land in your life like answers to questions you didn't even know you were asking. I started noticing those too, books that fell off shelves, a line in a podcast that felt like it was said just for me, a stranger's kindness that mirrored exactly what I needed that day. I don't think life had changed. I think I had. I had slowed down enough to actually notice, and this noticing wasn't passive. It was alive. I began to live in alignment, not obligation. I stopped doing things out of guilt or fear or pressure to perform. I asked myself, does this feel true? And if the answer wasn't a yes, I gave myself permission to walk away. There's something deeply sacred about choosing yourself. not in a loud, rebellious way, but in a quiet, grounded way, like planting your feet in the earth and saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for me. It doesn't mean life becomes easy. It doesn't mean you stop feeling doubt or fear or old guilt creeping in at the edges, but it does mean that when those feelings arise, you meet them from a place of rootedness. You don't get swept away. You stay, you breathe, you remember. There was a morning, I'll never forget it, when I woke up and didn't feel that familiar weight in my chest. No anxiety clawing at me before I even opened my eyes. Just a stillness. And it hit me. This is what it feels like when you stop betraying yourself. When your inner world and outer life begin to match. It was subtle, quiet, but it felt like a homecoming. The thing no one tells you is that alignment is magnetic. When you start living in truth, even messy, uncertain truth, the world begins to respond. Not always in big, dramatic ways, but in ways that matter. The right people find you, the right opportunities unfold, the right words come when you need them most. It's not magic, it's resonance, and it only happens when you stop silencing yourself. I think I used to believe that life had to be earned, that peace was a reward for doing everything right, but now I know peace comes when you stop lying to yourself, when you stop pretending to be okay with things that are slowly killing you. When you say yes only when you mean it, when your soul finally feels safe in your own presence. That's what this part of the journey feels like. Not fireworks, not applause, just truth. Quiet, deep truth that echoes inside your chest and says, you're finally listening. Keep going. There's this strange grief that comes with healing. No one really talks about it. Everyone talks about freedom, about becoming your true self, about the joy that comes when you start honoring your needs. And yes, all of that is real. But there's another side too, the ache of letting go of who you used to be, the you that survived by being agreeable, the you that kept the peace at the cost of your own, the you that twisted and molded and quieted down just to be loved. I missed her sometimes, not because I wanted to go back. I didn't, but because I understood her. She did the best she could with what she had. She kept me safe in rooms where I couldn't be real. She helped me belong, even if the price was my own voice, and letting her go felt like saying goodbye to an old friend, one who saved me even if she also kept me small. But the thing about growth is, it demands space, and I had to clear out everything that didn't align anymore. Not just people, but beliefs, stories, expectations, and God, that part hurt. I had to unlearn so much. I had to stop romanticizing suffering. I had to stop worshiping self-sacrifice. I had to challenge that voice in my head that said, you're only valuable if you're useful. And it was in that raw, messy undoing that I started to feel light again. Not all at once. It came in glimmers. Like the first time I said, I'm tired, without apologizing. The first time I asked for something I needed and didn't flinch when someone said no. The first time I didn't internalize someone else's disappointment as my failure. Those were the moments that rewrote everything. You start to realize how much of your life was built on performance. Not maliciously, just habitually. How many yes-as were really no's in disguise? How many smiles were shields? And when you strip that all away, you're left with something terrifyingly honest, yourself. Just you, without the roles, the filters, the defenses, and at first it's disorienting, but then it's liberating, because now when someone asks you what you want, you actually know. Now, when you sit with yourself in silence, you're not trying to escape. Now, when life hands you chaos, you meet it with presence, not panic. Not because you're invincible, but because you're rooted. You know who you are, and that knowing, it changes everything. There was a day, I remember it vividly, when someone tried to push one of my old buttons, the kind of conversation that would have sent me spiraling in the past. But I didn't flinch. I didn't over-explain. I didn't shrink. I just smiled, took a breath, and said, "That's not mine to carry." And it was like my whole body exhaled. That was the moment I knew I had outgrown the version of me who lived in survival. I was living in something else now, something softer, stronger. I think we expect transformation to feel like a breakthrough, but it's more like a quiet shift. One day, you just wake up and realize you're not chasing the same things anymore. You're not available for the same drama. You're not attracted to the same wounds. You want depth, peace, realness, and you're finally willing to walk away from anything that threatens that. That's not selfish, that's sacred. And the beauty is, when you start honoring your path, you naturally give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror, not of perfection, but of truth. And in a world addicted to performance, that's revolutionary. So yes, there is grief, there are goodbyes, there are lonely stretches on this path. But every time I chose myself, even when it was hard, even when it broke my heart, I built something unshakable, trust in me, in the quiet wisdom inside, in the life that blooms when I stop abandoning myself. And that more than anything is what healing gave me. Not certainty, not constant happiness, but the courage to stay with myself, no matter what. I don't know exactly when it happened, but at some point, I stopped needing to be understood by everyone. I stopped explaining myself to people who were never really listening. I stopped softening the truth so it would go down easier for someone else. Not because I didn't care, I cared deeply, but because I finally realized that shrinking my truth wasn't compassion. It was self-erasure. That realization didn't come easy. There were moments when I felt unbearably alone, when I questioned everything, when I thought, maybe I really am the problem, maybe I am asking for too much. That voice, the one shaped by years of trying to be the good one, still echoed in my head sometimes. But now I could recognize it for what it was, an old echo, not my truth, just a leftover program from a time when survival meant being agreeable. The more I honored my needs, the more I saw how many of my old relationships were built on my silence, on me not taking up space, on me being the safe one, the easy one. And when that changed, some relationships cracked, some shattered, others quietly faded, and for a while I grieved that. I grieved who I was in those relationships. I grieved the illusion that I could be loved if I just tried hard enough. But in that emptiness, something softer arrived, a kind of spaciousness I'd never known, the kind that comes when you're no longer performing, when your presence is no longer a transaction, when you can sit across from someone and say what you really mean, and if they stay, it's real, and if they leave, it's okay. That was new for me. Letting people go without internalizing it as failure, trusting that the ones who resonate with the real me would find their way. And they did. Slowly, unexpectedly, beautifully. I started attracting people who didn't flinch when I was honest, who didn't punish me for having boundaries, who didn't see my strength as a threat or my softness as weakness. People who met me with presence, not projection, who saw me not as a role to fulfill, but as a human being. And my God, the relief of that. It felt like breathing in a way I didn't even know I'd been holding my breath. That's the quiet miracle of choosing yourself. The world rearranges. It doesn't always happen fast, and it's not always easy, but it's real. Life begins to mirror your integrity. You stop begging for scraps and start recognizing your worth in the way you carry yourself, in the way you no longer betray your own truth for someone else's comfort. The irony, when I was constantly giving, pleasing, molding myself, I felt disconnected. I felt alone. But now, in my authenticity, even in solitude, I feel connected, not just to others, but to myself, to life, to something deeper I still don't fully have words for. And yes, sometimes people still misunderstand me. Sometimes the old guilt creeps in. Sometimes I falter, fall into patterns, forget what I've learned. But now I come back quicker. I forgive myself faster. I don't spiral for days the way I used to. I've built something inside, a kind of home. And no matter how loud the world gets, I can return there, always. That's the gift. Not perfection, not control, just truth. Spacious, grounded, unapologetic truth. It's not about being hard. It's about being whole. And wholeness. That's what I was really craving all along. I used to think healing was about becoming a better version of myself. More confident, more grounded, more enlightened. But the deeper I went, the more I realized. Healing isn't about becoming anything. It's about remembering, returning, coming home to the parts of me I abandoned because I thought they were unworthy of love. And now, after all of it, the unraveling, the grief, the letting go, I see it more clearly than ever. I wasn't broken. I was buried. Buried under years of shoulds and oughts, under shame and silence, under the false belief that love required self-erasure. But that old version of me, the one who thought boundaries were mean, that softness was weakness, that pleasing others would earn her peace, she wasn't wrong. She was just trying to survive. I don't hate her anymore. I thank her, because she carried me this far, but she doesn't drive anymore. She doesn't get to choose my path. The one who chooses now is rooted in truth, not fear. You know what's wild? The more I show up as myself, the more ease I feel. Not because life is easier, it's not, but because I'm not fighting myself every step of the way. I'm not performing for love I already deserve. I'm not chasing alignment, I am alignment. That changes everything. The right people feel it. Not all of them understand me, but they recognize something, a frequency, a presence, and they meet me there. The wrong ones fall away, and I don't fight it. That's not rejection, that's resonance. And I've stopped needing proof. I used to need confirmation that I was on the right path. Signs, reassurances, approval. But now I trust the quiet knowing in my chest. That grounded pulse that says, you're okay, you're enough, keep going. It shows up in little moments, like the ease I feel saying no without explaining, like the peace I feel after choosing rest instead of guilt, like the strength in my voice when I say, that doesn't work for me, and mean it. These are not small things, these are sacred, and maybe most of all, I've stopped rushing. I've stopped needing to be healed as if there's some finish line to cross. Now I'm just here, present, open, whole, even in my messiness, even in my uncertainty. Because wholeness doesn't mean perfection, it means inclusion, all parts welcome, the brave parts, the scared ones, the angry, tired, confused ones, even the ones that still want to run sometimes. They get to stay, they get to belong. That's what Jung meant, I think, when he talked about individuation, becoming who you truly are by integrating what you once rejected. And maybe, just maybe, this is what it means to love yourself. Not the glossy Instagram kind, but the real, gritty, deep kind, the kind that sits with you in the dark and whispers, even here, you're still worthy. So no, I don't have all the answers. I'm not always graceful, but I'm honest, I'm present, and I'm done abandoning myself. That, for me, is everything.